We'll get that going. All right, well, hello everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. Our topic today is rain gardens. We will be focusing on the Everett Rain Garden Program, but essentially the science of rain gardens and how they're built and all of that is applicable, doesn't matter where you are. So we look forward to sharing with you on that today. So my name is Kari Kwas. I am the Community Engagement Project Manager at the Snohomish Conservation District. We work in partnership with WSU in Everett to do these. And so you're here today for the Rain Garden Q&A. And we'd like to thank the City of Everett. They sponsor these webinars, and it's mainly because they want people to understand how their efforts and related to stormwater runoff. So when rain hits the ground, it picks up bad stuff. And then that goes into our storm drains. So rain gardens are one of the ways that we can help protect our water and quality and keep it safe for everybody. So thanks to the City of Everett. And then also we partner with WSU, Snohomish County Extension. They do the plant side of the rain gardens and also have a ton of resources for us all. So today, when you're interacting with us, we'd like you, if you have technical issues, put those in the chat. And if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A box. We will be answering those. Philomena will be answering at breaks and at the end. And hopefully we've set up the webinar, or Derek's done his part to answer questions along the way. But if you have specific things, we can help with that later too. So yeah, Q&A is down there at the bottom. So please use that for questions. Just a little bit about the Snohomish Conservation District. We are a state agency. We represent Snohomish County and Camano Island locally. We partner with the City of Everett and many other jurisdictions for stormwater and technical assistance, and we do education and a bunch of other stuff. So check out our website. We probably have some fact sheet or some information about what you're looking for related to protecting natural resources. We did just have Orca Recovery Day, and we're still in Orcatober. So we have on our website a scavenger hunt, so you can still go out and see different restoration projects from rain gardens or native planting buffers, all kinds of things that are there. So take a look. We do have another webinar this afternoon at 3 o'clock for RETA, which is renewable energy. So if you live in a rural area, not in the city, there's projects and funding to help you get maybe solar panels or wind energy on your your business or your property. So check that out too. And next week we have one on living with beavers. So I hope everybody, when they signed up for this, I was trying to send out emails throughout the time when you registered of the map that April put together from the city about where the rain gardens are. And also there's the list of the addresses. And so you can do that after the fact, and hopefully everyone was able to make it out and see those. One other aspect I wanted to talk about related to the city in general work here is the Monte Cristo Award. And that is an opportunity for people who do green gardening. Rain gardens are definitely green gardening. Pollinator habitats, growing food. Instead of having lawn, you can be eligible for this award. It was called off for 2020 because COVID, but it should be back in 2021. And it's a really nice honor to feel like you're doing something for the environment and get recognized by your peers. So with me today, I have April Hines. She is the Public Information Education Specialist at the City of Everett. She works in the Public Works Department. So when you're on their website, you'll see her contact information all over the place. And she's the one who helps us partner on these events. Also, we have Philomena Kedzorski, and she's with the WSU Snohomish County Extension. She helps with Master Gardeners. Again, they have a ton of webinars and resources. So by all means, if you have plant questions, pest questions, all kinds of things, you can reach out to the Master Gardeners and they'll be able to help. Also with me is my colleague, David Jackson. He's the Community Conservation Program Manager at the Snohomish Conservation District. He's the one that helps with the implementation and planning of rain gardens in the city of Everett, among other community conservation, urban ag, and that type of programming. And then our main speaker today is my other colleague, Hann. He's our district engineer, and he's the one who would be designing the rain gardens and doing the engineering piece of the whole program. So he would come out and see if a rain garden is right for your property. Sometimes it is and sometimes it isn't. So we'll talk into the whys and hows of all of that. So thank you again for being here today. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Derek, and he's going to walk through what a rain garden is and what it does. So thanks again for joining us today, and feel free to ask us questions along the way. Derek.
Thank you. Let me make sure I get this going. All right, is that up? Can you see that okay, Kari?
Yeah, I can see it just fine. Thanks.
So this is supposed to be a Q&A, so please ask lots of questions as I go through this. And in fact, if there's any questions at the start, just chat those into your box. And Kari, will you field those for me? So just feel free to interrupt as things come up.
Yeah, between Philomena and myself, we'll ask the questions.
Okay, sounds good. So I'm a civil engineer. I've been working with the Snohomish Conservation District for 10 years. We've been doing rain gardens in the city of Everett. This is our 8th or 9th year. And I've worked all over the county and in fact all over Puget Sound designing and implementing rain gardens. We've learned quite a bit in the process of doing this over the last 10 years. So I'm going to share kind of what that looks like. And then some tips on how you can do your own, be part of the Everett program, and then hopefully answer any questions. Is there any way we can find out who was able to go out? Maybe that would be a good first question.
Oh, yeah, let me launch the poll. 1 second. Here we go.
Right.
Everyone should be seeing that. Were you able to go out and do the rain garden tour?
Yes, that works. So the first thing we're going to talk about is why we're doing rain gardens to begin with. So we have a stormwater problem. It's a global problem, but it's particularly difficult in the area that we live because we get so much stormwater. So 100 to 150 years ago, all of the area where we're living right now looked like this. It was dense forest. And so when a raindrop fell out of the sky, what happened was it would hit a leaf and then drip off that leaf and hit another leaf and drip off that leaf and hit another leaf. And every time it drips, a certain percent of the water evaporates back into the atmosphere. And in addition, it takes a really long time for that water to finally reach the ground from the trees. And then once it reaches the ground, it soaks really quickly up into the native soil, and then it works its way very, very, very slowly through the soil to the nearest creek or to the nearest stream. And that's the way things have been for millions of years until we came in and started developing. So this is about the percentage that you could expect in native conditions. About 50% of the water actually goes straight back up in the atmosphere. And about 35% of the water is stored in the soils. And then only 15% of that water makes its way to a nearby stream or creek. So we came in and those surfaces are called pervious. That just means that water flows into them. So native forests are pervious surfaces. And modern development has created the opposite of that. It's created surfaces that we call impervious. So instead of a long, complicated flow path of the raindrop after it leaves the sky, it hits a hard surface. Only about 10% of that water evaporates after it hits the surface, and it immediately runs off to the nearest catch basin, which ties directly to the stream. So it makes all the water go, all the water goes to the streams all at the same time. And it's kind of like traffic on I-5. If everybody's trying to get on I-5, everything backs up. So we end up with flooding conditions when all of our surfaces in the city are impervious. The other issue that it causes is pollution. So these surfaces are full of oils and heavy metals and chemicals and nutrients, and all of that washes up in that rain and then goes to the nearest catch basin and then flows again to the nearest creek and causes all kinds of degrading pollution issues in our creeks. So in our urban watershed, only 15 to 30% of that water is evaporating back into the atmosphere. very little of the water makes its way and is held in the soil, and almost all of the water ends up running off to our nearby creeks. So that causes flooding issues because everything backs up. It causes soil erosion issue because that water is moving so much faster than it used to, and because we have so many areas that don't have vegetation on them. The water cuts into the soil and picks up particles of the soil and moves it to the downstream, which then causes sediment issues, but also causes destability issues, causes pollution issues. And then we also have the issue of less groundwater, especially in areas where they rely on wells. We need that water to infiltrate into the soil so it can recharge the aquifers. And if that's happening less and less because we've capped over the top of our developed areas, we just have less groundwater to work with. So this is called a catch basin. It's just, I'm sure all of you have seen it. It's a grate where all the stormwater goes to. Commonly, people think that this receives some kind of treatment after the water goes into this. In many parts of Everett, it does, but there are also some parts of Everett where it doesn't receive any treatment at all and goes directly to the Puget Sound. And so that's what our concern is long term. This is what a catch basin looks like before it goes in the ground, just so people know. It's just a big concrete box, and then the pipes go into the side, and they connect one to another to another. I'm going to skip that one. So that's kind of the background of why we're doing rain gardens. From environmental purpose, many of you will probably have other reasons to do a rain garden, and that's totally fine. But from the conservation district standpoint and the city standpoint, that's really what we're concerned about. Additionally, on top of that, City of Everett does have some areas of combined sewer overflow, and that means that the stormwater and the sewage all goes to the same spot, and that goes to that sewage treatment plant north of Everett on Smith Island. And so that means if during a really heavy rain event, sometimes all of that sewage will overflow because there's too much volume, and then we end up with sewage in the river. So that's another reason that we're trying to put in rain gardens in Everett, is to reduce that loading during a storm event. So if you're thinking about putting in a rain garden, I would recommend you start with the rain garden handbook. It's a really good place to start. The one thing I will say about the handbook is it's a little bit overcomplicated at times, and it can be a little bit belt and suspenders. So people end up a little bit intimidated sometimes, and the rain garden design doesn't have to be quite as difficult or complicated as the rain garden handbook makes it. But I will say the handbook covers almost all potential issues you'd run into. So it's a really good resource. Just don't let it intimidate you. So what is a rain garden? A rain garden is just a big hole that we dig in the ground, and we backfill it with a special type of soil. We cover it with mulch, and then we plant it with native plants. And the idea is we take water from impervious areas and we send it to the rain garden, and the water, ideally all of the water, will infiltrate down into the native soil. And what we're doing with the rain garden is we're making a little miniature forest. So those forested conditions that we had, that we talked about at the beginning of the presentation, this is a little tiny version of it. They're usually about 200 to 300 square feet in area, where we're trying to get the water to behave in the same way that it always has behaved historically. Nice open soils that infiltrate well, trying to recharge that groundwater table, a good mulch layer on top, like would exist in a forest with all the leaves and branches and stuff falling, and then lots of native plants. First thing we do with a rain garden is we dig a big hole. The minimum depth of a rain garden is 2¼ feet or 27 inches. And that ends up being pretty deep. Some people that see us doing this ask if we're putting in a swimming pool or something, because it's a big hole. We want a nice flat level bottom, and we want the bottom to be loose soil so that the water can infiltrate into that native soil table if we need it to. We like to dig the sidewalls of our rain gardens as vertical as possible. And yeah, and we like to put lots of curves in our rain gardens because it tends to look better. It works just fine if you make it a square or a rectangle, but it looks a little bit more natural in the end if we do curve. Do we have any questions so far?
We do not have any questions, but maybe we want to ask the question of why everyone is interested in a rain garden.
There you go.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to launch this because we're just curious. And if it's other, not one of those choices, feel free to write it in the chat box.
All right, then we'll keep moving.
Thanks.
So construction. During construction, we backfill this hole. So we dig a hole and then we backfill it. We have to have at least 18 inches of a very special soil mix. It's called compost amended soil or rain garden mix or bioretention soil. And it's basically 60% sand and 40% compost. And it's made to infiltrate fast, so the water will move through it quickly, but not too quickly. So it doesn't infiltrate as fast as pure sand, but it moves a lot faster than, say, the native soils that you have in your yard. And it holds a lot more water than a typical soil will. And we have the compost in there to help with plant growth and then also with removing pollutants.
I do have a question for you, Derek.
Yeah, go ahead.
If you have heavy clay soil, do you prep that initial hole in some way?
Yeah, so heavy clay or dense soil, which we have a lot of in Everett. Sometimes there's some special considerations that have to happen if you have a really dense soil that doesn't infiltrate as well. One is making sure that in case it does overflow, you have a good safe place to put that water. But that is kind of a more advanced question that you'd probably want to talk to me or another person with a lot of experience about. I will say that we, at the Conservation District, in partnership with the city, we have a program where I can come out to your property and talk to you about the specific site that you're working on, your particular property. So if you do have a dense clay soil, there may be something that we have to do in addition to make that work. But we can work with you to work that out. And we've done a number of these rain gardens in Everett in areas with very poor soils, and they've performed surprisingly well over time. So so rain gardens can be done even in tricky soils. There's just some creative things that we may have to do in order to make it work better.
Thank you. And then one other person commented, Kay, our house's perimeter drains are full of needles and don't work. And maybe my question tied to that would be, you could still have the downspout directed to a rain garden regardless of those drain holes, right, Derek? If the downspouts are working and it's the drains below the downspouts that are filled up, you could go away from that and direct the water into a rain garden. It wouldn't be tied to the specific perimeter.
And actually, in a rain garden, we like to try and get pipe inlets to come in above the soil as much as possible. Mostly because of that issue, because you don't end up with plugged pipes with needles and that type of thing. But yes, if you have a plugged up drain system, we'd probably just disconnect you from the downspout and run a new pipe to the rain garden. But yeah, the needles and sediment in gutters are something we may have to mitigate for. So whether that's some kind of filter on the downspout or something inside of the garden to make sure that the water's moving, that is something that we'd have to think about.
Yeah, and the follow-up comment to that is, yeah, the plan is to redirect it to the rain garden. So it'd be great to get out and take a look at that site.
Yeah, and yeah, that's something we can do.
And that's all for now. Thanks.
Okay. So this is what that bioretention soil looks like, that rain garden soil mix. It's really, really rich. It's really easy to work with. You can make nice contour shapes. You will notice that we have that when the rain garden's done, it has a bold shape to it. So there is still a depression in it. And that's important for the function of the rain garden. We call that a ponding area. And ideally it's about 6 inches deep in the middle, deeper in the middle than it is on the outside edges. You can see the pipe inlet here. So there's the downspout coming down here, and then it goes underground and then outlets to this rock pad here. We put the rocks there because this bioretention soil is very sensitive to erosion. So if you channelize a bunch of water at it, it'll cut a channel through the soil. So we put the rock around to slow that water down and protect that soil. Yeah, so it needs to be at least 18 inches deep. And the soil needs to be placed dry. So when we do rain garden construction, ideally we do it during the summer months. Right now we're doing a couple for Everett, but we're really pushing the weather, trying to get this done while it's still relatively dry out. And we look like we're on pace to get that finished. You don't want to compact the soil during placement, at least before you put the mulch layer on. Once we put the mulch layer on, it makes this mat over the top, and then you can get in to the rain garden and weed and move plants around and that type of thing. But before the mulch goes over the top, the soils are pretty sensitive to being compacted. And if they compact, they won't infiltrate as well as they ought to. So during construction, making sure that we definitely don't have heavy machinery out in the rain garden and that we're walking over the top of it as little as possible. I think I covered all of these. Oh, some people often ask, can I make a rain garden mix on site or do I have to buy it? Honestly, I don't recommend you mixing your own rain garden soil on site. Usually the native soils around here are just not well draining enough. They're not the pure sand like when you buy it. And they just don't, it doesn't end up functioning as well. And the only reason to mix your soil on site would be to save money. But honestly, in the long run, most people don't end up saving money because they spend so much time and labor to create kind of an inferior product. So we usually recommend that people just buy their rain garden soil mix. So after the soil's down, then we cover everything in a mulch layer. We use this product exclusively. It's called Animal Friendly Hog Fuel, which is a really weird name. And this is 100% wood mulch product. It's shredded wood. There's no bark in it. There's no soil in it. It's just wood. And it's shredded, and it's not chips. Chips tend to float and move around a lot, and they don't make this nice mat over the top like this product does. This does a really good job of keeping weeds down, probably better than any mulch product I've ever seen. It really does really good at keeping weeds down. It makes this nice mat over the top so you can walk over the top of it. It infiltrates well so water will go through it, but then during the summer when it's warm, it keeps the soils underneath from getting too hot. The one complaint we get about this is some people don't like the color of it. It goes down kind of an orangish color and then it bleaches into kind of a blondish color over time, and some people really are not fond of that color. So one solution that we've come up with to that for the people that just can't handle that is called bark nuggets. So we would put down that animal friendly hog fuel, at least 3 inches minimum of mulch, and then we would cover it with these larger chunks of bark nuggets. And that adds a brownish color to the mulch. And we don't want to use, I think I cover this here. We want this to be coarse and woody. And we really don't want any bark to be in this at all because the fine particles of bark will work their way into the soil and plug everything up and reduce infiltration. Arborist mulch is a good alternative to the animal friendly hog fuel. That's just what comes out of a chipper after an arborist does a tree. And sometimes you can find those for free. But there is a little bit of variability in what you get when you buy arborist chips. Sometimes it's mostly leaves and needles, and sometimes it's a lot of wood. But we have had some people that have had success using arborist chips.
Derek, we do have a question, and I gotta say you have the funnest names for your products. But um, so Stacy asks, have you experimented with biochar or fungal additions to the rain garden to help break down and absorb pollution?
Yeah, so biochar has been experimented with. They've had mixed results uh, due to the fines issue. There's another bio. It's not biochar. There's another bio. Or there's a different version of that that they've had more success with, and it's escaping me right now what that's called. But the fungus stuff, yes, for sure. We've done the fungus pellets, uh, where they come in just pellets about that big, and you spread them out over the garden, and they're usually oyster mycelium, and that works really well over time. But honestly, just putting the mulch down, usually there's enough mycelium in the native mulch that within a couple of months, just pulling that mulch layer back, you'll see the mycelium and the fungus all through the thing. So it doesn't even really need to be seeded. Pretty instantly, most of the time, the natural processes will start that fungal process. So, but yeah, those do a lot, especially for water quality treatment. And helping kind of open up the pore space in that soil. It's a good question. Like I mentioned earlier, we need at least 6 inches of ponding in our rain garden. The rain garden is not supposed to have standing water in it, so it's not a pond. Some people get the idea in their head that this is going to be kind of like a pond that they have fish and stuff in, and it's really supposed to be dry most of the time. During a big rain event, you may have standing water for a couple of hours, but if it's longer than 72 hours, the rain garden is considered failed. It's supposed to drain in less time than that. And that's because 72 hours is the gestation period for mosquitoes, and we don't want these to turn into big mosquito pits. So mosquitoes are not a issue with rain gardens as long as they drain within 72 hours. We have had no issues with mosquitoes when it comes to rain gardens, unlike a pond would have. This is what the rain garden looks like after all the plants have gone in. I'm not going to cover plants as much. Philomena, I believe, Philomena is probably one of the best resources for plants. I deal mostly with the technical soil and water side of things. But I will say that the rain garden soil mix that we put down is incredibly rich soil, and the plants tend to grow very quickly and very aggressively. We learned this the hard way the first couple of years that we did this program, where we put plants in that ended up getting too big for the space. So especially for rain gardens in residential areas, we encourage you to do smaller grasses and emergence, maybe with 1 or 2 bushes, to serve as accent pieces or focal pieces, but for the most part, keep everything really small. And if it looks like, or if it says on the tag that the plant will get 2 to 4 feet, it might get 6 feet, 6 or 7 feet. So that's one thing to keep in mind as you're selecting plants to put in this rain garden. We do have to have a way to get water in to the rain garden. So this is, again, is that rain garden inlet. So there's a downspout here. The pipe goes underground and then outlets to a rock pad. That's typically what we do for downspouts. If we're taking an area of driveway or road or walkway, we usually just locate the garden in a place where the water can sheet flow off of that surface and into the rain garden.
Can you take another question, Derek?
Yeah, go ahead.
Some of the rain gardens we toured appeared to have catch basins at their center. Were we seeing that correctly?
Yeah, so it is a version of a catch basin. It's something we developed at the district called a vertical underdrain, and it's a special type of overflow, basically, that people have been playing with ways. If you install a rain garden in a soil that really has a risk of overflowing often, it's a way to do that creatively. And it's basically just a 3-foot section of 18-inch diameter pipe that's placed vertically in the rain garden, and then there's a lid over the top of it, and then there's a horizontal piece of pipe that connects underground, and water runs from that vertical under drain to the nearest catch basin or a place where it can safely drain to. So yeah, and that's not typical. That's only done in rain gardens where we're really concerned about the underlying soils. So that I talked about creative things that we can do if you have clay soils, and that's one of the easier things to do. Would be put in some type of a vertical under drain. But yeah, that's a good question. But that's not, most of the time we're not putting those in, just in rain gardens with some challenges to the soil. Oops. How do I go back? You also have to have a way of getting water out of the rain garden in case it does overflow. So that would involve usually what's called a weir overflow, where there's a little bit of a low spot on the downstream side of the rain garden that water can go out of and flow to the street. Sometimes we use a pipe overflow too. That's about it for the technical aspects of the rain garden. I went a little fast because I was anticipating some more questions. Let's do questions now, and then I do have some other presentations I can pull from if we want to look at a couple of other things or look at other pictures of rain gardens. So let's start there, see if anybody has any questions. Field those for a while, and then I'll.
Here's a question.
Yeah.
Is there a problem if the outflow has to go over a gas line?
So overflow from a gas line, no, usually our overflows, even if it's a piped overflow, it's pretty shallow. We're usually only burying our pipe a couple of inches, and gas lines should be significantly deeper than that. And same for inlet pipes. So if you have the pipe from your downspout and into your rain garden, it's okay to cross lines as long as we're really careful about it. You will want to have those located, so call 811, have the utility company come out and figure out where those lines are. But typically crossing over a rain garden with a drain, or a utility with a drain pipe is not an issue, but you do want to be a little bit careful when you do it, usually using hand tools and not a big piece of machinery or something like that that's going to rip things out of the ground. Normally, utilities are supposed to be buried at a certain depth so that you don't encounter them when you trench, but that's not always the case. So you do have to be a little careful, but it's pretty rare for us to have a utility conflict when it comes to pipe trenching.
We have a question from Kay. I have very sandy soil, 95%. When I did the soil drainage test, the soil drained almost faster than we could fill the hole. Is this a problem?
No, that's great. That's ideal for a rain garden. So ideally, we want these rain gardens to drain really quickly. So I mean, we're often doing them because people have flooding problems, but the perfect rain garden actually has really well draining underlying soils. So no, that's a great thing to have.
No questions yet?
Well, here's another one from Joe. Is there any sort of maintenance required for the rain garden?
Yeah, man, that's a good one. So rain garden maintenance, typically the first year or two, you'll have to water during the summer just to get the plants established, especially if we end up having long, hot, dry summers. This year we didn't, so watering wasn't as big of a concern, but in years prior we have. The other thing is just, I mean, basic plant care, keeping an eye on making sure garbage and sediment isn't getting into the rain garden. That's not usually very common. You may want to replenish the mulch every year. You don't have to put down nearly as much as you did the first time when you constructed it, but it might be where I usually put a yard or so of mulch. I have 2 rain gardens. So between the 2 of them, I split about a yard of mulch and just do a top dressing because that mulch will break down over time. And and you want to make sure that you have that nice woody content over the top of it. It's really very low maintenance. Weeding, you will have to get it there and do weeding, but again, if you do the mulch layer properly, weeding should be pretty minimal. I weed mine. Mine has been in for 4 years, and honestly, at this point, I only weed it once a year because the plants are well enough established that they shade out most of the significant weed growth. So usually, like June, I go in and give it May or June, give it a good weeding. But for the most part, it's not difficult. So most of the maintenance happens in the first year or two, and then after that, it kind of evens itself out and is pretty simple to take care of. But that's a good question. If you build it right the first time and you put your mulch layer down, maintenance is very simple, and especially compared to like a lawn, it's much easier to take care of.
They also asked if there's any need to recharge the special soils.
Oh, so these soils, in theory, last between 20 and 30 years. But that is in fairly extreme testing situations. So I honestly don't think there'd probably be any situation where most of you would need to replace any of the bioretention soil. The one exception would be if something weird happened and you had some kind of weird spill, or you had a really heavy sediment load. Even in those situations, usually only the top 5 or 6 inches of soil needs to be replaced, but we've never had that. I think at this point at the district, we've put in over 300 rain gardens, and we've never had one where we haven't had one yet where we've had to go back and do any significant soil repair, just top dressing in the mulch. So no, that's not something that you need to be worried about.
This is Kari again. I guess because I know I work at the district, and these rain gardens can take on a whole lot of water. But Derek, what is the biggest rain garden that you have engineered for the district?
So we did one for a dairy up on Camano Island that went in 2 years ago. And that one is almost 30,000 square feet. So more than half an acre in size. It's really large, and it takes runoff from a huge portion of the dairy, which had, not only is the volume of water high, but the water is extremely dirty. So it's got manure and silage all mixed in with it. And we put it in this really, really large facility, and it's working really well. The dairy owner was pretty skeptical about the whole system to begin with, but in the last 2 years has really come on board and been really impressed with how well it's working. So that's probably been one of the more fun ones we've done, and it's definitely the largest one.
That's so cool. I'm wondering if this would be a good time to change over to April Hines with the city so she can talk about city specifics related to their program, and then we can come back to plants and other questions.
That sounds good to me.
Yeah. April, are you ready to share? Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So yeah, I'm very happy to be here and talk a little bit about the rebate specific program. It was great to have Derek talk specifics about the rain garden and engineering them and putting them together. But the plan at this point is to switch gears and talk a little bit about our rebate program that we offer for City of Everett residents. So let me just pull up my slideshow here. Is it showing?
Yes, it is.
Okay, perfect. So really the plan for me is to just touch a little bit upon the program timeline, talk a little bit about site assessments and that soil infiltration test that it sounds like some people have actually already done, so that's awesome. And then what's involved with the application and then the rebate process itself. I always like to stop for just a moment and point out to some of you that it may be obvious, but just to make it clear that the City of Everett Rain Garden rebates are only for those within the city limits. Snohomish Conservation District has some really great programming and some potential cost sharing things that you can do for a rain garden, but this particular rebate program is only for City of Everett residents. So Derek touched upon it a little bit, that idea of urban reality versus the getting back to nature. And part of what the city of Everett is trying to do here is we have a series of green stormwater infrastructure programs. And the idea is to help homeowners to manage the rainwater, stormwater runoff on their property. We do that through our rain garden program, rain barrels, our natural yard care series, talking about how to deal with stormwater, and then what role you play in what is polluting our stormwater and what you could do differently. Kind of that idea of our urban reality where we have this high percentage of stormwater runoff, and then trying to get back to more natural green ways of dealing with stormwater, where you really do find a much lower percentage of that runoff. So the idea is to slow it down, to spread out that runoff, to allow it time to soak in. And then in that time, because you're allowing it to slow down, it allows to filter out a lot of those pollutants. So these programs are really a way to go back to the green way of doing things and dealing with stormwater. So the rebate program is really in 4 stages. So you have a planning stage, a building stage, a planting stage, and a maintaining stage. And then that planning stage involves doing a site assessment with the city, that soil infiltration test, starting to plan out what the sizing will need to be for your rain garden, what shape you want it, where it's going to go, and really putting all those pieces together. And then the building stage, where Derek covered a lot of that, of how you go about building and installing your rain garden, and then planting it, and then maintaining it. With our rebate program, I'll touch more on it later, but we do have a maintenance agreement that all of our rebate recipients have to sign. And you're really within that agreement agreeing to have your maintaining your rain garden for up to 10 years. So that's a really important piece to think about when you're looking at participating in the rain garden rebate program. So as you can see from this at the top, we have our rain garden timeline that I've just kind of covered with the planning, the building, the planting, and maintaining. And then at the bottom here is more of the city rebate timeline, which we work on a calendar year. And so what happens at the beginning of the year is we really kind of put out the notice that we're starting our rebate program for the year. And then in that early spring is when those site assessments happen. So what Derek was talking about with the technical side of visits, you're more than happy to take advantage of that as Everett residents. You could have Snohomish Conservation District come out and look at your property. The nice thing about having them come out is if a rain garden doesn't work, they can be really helpful as to what would work. So they can give you other suggestions if a rain garden may not work. If it looks like a rain garden is something that will work on your property, you still have to go through the additional step of having a city site assessment. The city will come out and look at your site, and then you'll be doing a soil infiltration test based on that. And those are happening usually in the springtime. It's a great time with that soil already being kind of wet. And then applications to the city for your rain garden are due in the summer. And then the fall is really that time to do excavation and planting your rain garden. And throughout that process, the city does come by and inspect the install and the planting, and then at the end, making sure that it's looking the way it should. And then your rebate paperwork is due by the end of the year. So you can kind of see that on that calendar year, we have different milestones that you need to kind of be aware of and keep track of. So I touched a little bit upon the city site assessment just to kind of point out what to expect with these. Your responsibility obviously is to call the city to schedule that site assessment. We do those during business hours, Monday through Friday. And then you'll want to make sure that you call 811 to have all your utilities marked. There's actually a couple times in the process where you'll be calling 811, but one of those is when you're doing your site assessment. So we'll be able to make sure that everyone is on the same page as to where your utilities are. And then your job is to really observe where the movement of water is. Where is that water moving on your property? Because that can definitely be an issue for some who may see some flooding of stormwater on their property, and rain gardens can be a great way to deal with that. And during the assessment, the city will come on your property, they'll take pictures, they'll look at your downspouts, they'll walk the property with you, help you decide if you haven't already where a rain garden might work, measuring to see the sizing of your rain garden, and obviously looking at some of the locations of the utilities. to see how that could affect the placement of your rain garden. And then they'll also mark locations that they would like for you to do the soil infiltration test. So I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here, but I did want to highlight that this is one of those things that is a must do if you want to be part of the rebate program. You have to do a soil infiltration test. That is the biggest way we can see if your property is a viable option for a rain garden. And it's an easy thing to do. It's just digging a hole, using a yardstick, pouring in some water, and keeping track of it. We have a lot more detailed information on how to do that with a step-by-step on our application, but just to kind of give you the piece of that would be something that you would need to do. Along with doing that test and giving us the results, you actually sign saying that these are verified and true results of your soil infiltration test. So as I kind of mentioned, that soil infiltration test is on our website, and it's very easy to get to our website. It's literally everettwa.gov/rain gardens. And at the site, it has pretty much any of the documentation forms that you may need. It has an application checklist, frequently asked questions. It's got a couple of videos on rain gardens. And then we also actually have the Western Washington Rain Garden Handbook, which is something that Derek had mentioned earlier. So you can download it from here. It is a pretty hefty manual, so I'm more than happy to send you a hard copy if you would prefer. I'm a paper kind of person myself, so I'm happy to send one to you if you think it would be helpful. It really does have everything and more that you could need to know about a handbook, and it is something that the city uses as their guideline for rain gardens. So one of the things I had said on the website is that your application is there. So I just wanted to, and then this is the piece that is due in the summer. So as part of an application checklist, you'll have that site assessment done with the city. You'll have infiltration test results. Those will be signed and attached to that. And then in addition to that, you'll also be signing and notarizing the rain garden maintenance agreement. I'll talk more about that in just a minute. And then you'll be actually putting a sketch together for your rain garden with the sizing, the design, and the planting plan. One of the things that's really great about our partnership with Snohomish Conservation District and WSU Extension is that we have a lot of experts here to help you. We have a lot of resources to help you put those pieces together. You can also obviously hire a contractor to do a lot of that if you really want to be more hands-off. But if you choose to kind of go it alone and you want to do it, we do have a lot of resources available to you to help put together that planting plan and your design of your rain gardens. So after your application has been turned in and approved, then you move into the installation and inspection, which is part of that build and planting part. At the bottom, you can see kind of what I already kind of mentioned, that we do have a lot of resources available to you. And this is just to highlight that idea that we're really open to you either using a contractor to do the work. We are fine with you doing the work. You can have your neighbors and friends come over. Hopefully we'll be back to doing that in the future, where you could actually hang out with people and have them over to put together installing your rain garden. We also have resources, like I said, Snohomish Conservation District and WSU to help. Let's see. So for the rebate itself, the maximum rebate is $2,500, and that rebate is based solely on your receipts. So it's very important once you know that you're in the program and you're going to be doing it, to make sure that you're keeping track of all your receipts. And the rebate really can cover anything that's relevant to installing your rain garden, from buying shovels or renting of equipment, the bio-retention soil, the mulch. All those kind of things are included as part of this. And I know Derek talked a little bit about being able to, or at least discouraging people from mixing it on site, the bioretention soil. I do want to say that as part of the rebate, you are required to actually buy bioretention soil. You cannot be mixing it on site. We need to verify and make sure that it's exactly what it needs to be in order to be part of the rain garden program. So there are some legal agreements that are part of being in the rebate program. We do, as a city, view each of these rain gardens that are put in as part of our larger stormwater facility infrastructure. And as such, we require everyone to sign a maintenance agreement. And that maintenance agreement means that you will keep your rain garden installed, maintained, and in working order for at least 10 years. That rain garden maintenance agreement must be signed and notarized by you. It's signed and notarized by the mayor of Everett. And then it is also attached to the deed of your house. So that is something that will stay with your house. So even if you sell, the new owner that comes in will still be responsible for that maintenance agreement because it stays with the house, not with the owner that put it in. In addition to that, you will also be doing a statement of rain garden function. This is a document that you do after you've installed your rain garden. And really what you're saying with this document is, I've tested my rain garden, it works. For most people, that means just watching it during a big rainstorm and seeing what happens. We did have one person one year get done putting in their rain garden in like August, and there was no rain, so they did their own test with a hose. So that is possible. But in general, most of the time, these rain gardens are put in the fall. So you're able to let nature take its course and just watch your rain garden and make sure it's actually functioning. So through I think I mentioned it, but through the install, we do have city inspectors coming out to check out the rain garden, making sure a lot of those pieces that Derek talked about with, making sure that the bottom of the rain garden is flat, that it's not too compacted, that you're using the correct soils, that you've put in enough mulch, that the sizing and location is correct. So a lot of those are inspected by city staff throughout the process of putting in your rain garden. Kind of what Kari had mentioned earlier, my information is pretty much in a lot of places on the website, but one of the main places obviously is the rain garden page. So feel free at any time to get in touch if you have any questions or if you want to start the process of getting involved with the rebate program with Everett. And then without that, if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer.
There are none at this time, but I'm sure they will come in. I want to just say that to April and Philomena was there too, and Derek back in the day. I had applied to be on a rain garden thing, and I remember one of the coolest things is I got the public works layout of my property. So I knew where the water line was and where my house was and the slope of the property. So the whole process is just kind of cool, and that you learn a lot about where you live and how it's been set up.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that's been, at least in the past, again, I'm really kind of unclear at this point what 2021 is going to look like. But one of the other things that I find most refreshing about the rebate process is we usually will have design workshops where people can come in and, like you said, get the really big map of their property and aerial with some of the markings of the different utilities within Everett. And but we also have people there to help you design your rain garden, and you get to know your neighbors, because sometimes you may find that there's someone down the street who's putting in a rain garden, and you can actually find really creative ways to work together, whether that means sharing equipment or really just meeting your neighbors. And so it can be a really great way to build that community feel, especially if you start to see the momentum of people in a neighborhood, more than one person putting in a rain garden. Because if you're having a problem with flooding, it's possible that you have a neighbor that's also having the same problem. So seeing rain gardens is a really great tool to deal with that. If your site is viable, it can be a great way to do that. So a lot of those rain gardens that you saw on the tour were pilot rain gardens that were done, I don't know if it's more than 9 years ago, I think, at this point. And because of that, we were able to really get that community feel of having a lot go in one neighborhood. And we chose that neighborhood because of the flooding. There was some serious flooding going on in this area. And all of those homeowners have seen no more flooding since they've put in these rain gardens. So it really can make a difference in the flow of stormwater on your property.
Yeah, I think from the map, I'm seeing 2011, I think, was some of the first ones that went in from that area.
And those are the ones that had those kind of under drains that someone had mentioned. And that was because we really did treat that project as a pilot project. So we tried a lot of different things and a lot of different sizings and things like that on those rain gardens, because we wanted to, this was, 9 years ago, rain gardens were new and up and coming. And so it really was a way to pilot different parameters for rain gardens. And as Derek said, we've really found that those aren't necessarily needed in a lot of times, because rain gardens have over time been able to show themselves as working really well in a variety of different soils.
So we do have a couple questions now. One, and I think this one may go to Derek and David, but this Kay asks if she's in North King County, do we have resources for assistance with design for those not in Snohomish County?
David, do you want to take that one?
Sorry, I was trying to find my mute button. Can you repeat the question so I can make sure I answer it fully?
Yeah, the question is for someone who lives in North King County. Do we have resources for assistance with design for those not in Snohomish County?
The folks that I would talk to, if you are in unincorporated Snohomish County, I would talk to, or King County, I would talk to King County Surface Water first. Good design resources are the Rainwise program, as well as the Western Washington Rain Garden Handbook. I believe that King County Conservation District is getting some stuff stood up, but they don't have anything at the moment. So either your municipality or King County Surface Water would be the folks that I would contact.
You might also try reaching out to stewardship partners because they'd be able to identify if there's any other potential resources in your area.
Yeah, Aaron Clark at Stewardship Partners is a wonderful resource.
That does remind me that there is a website, the 12,000 Rain Gardens, which if you are interested in touring more than just City of Everett Rain Gardens, they're a great resource. They have a map that shows the region, and within the region they have like little raindrops, and if you click on those, it'll actually, people have registered their rain gardens throughout Puget Sound, and so you really can get a better feel for the type of rain gardens, because you can do a more formal rain garden, you can do kind of a native rain garden. There's a lot of different options, and we tried to with the map to show you different options, but if you want to go even bigger, you can. That there is that resource, and again, it's 12,000raingardens.org, I believe.
I just put that in the chat. We have one other question from Kimdy. It's, can someone give some parameters of property that would be ideal for a rain garden? For instance, if you live in a sloped area with a lot of runoff, is it a flooding issue, or it isn't a flooding issue, but a lot of stormwater runoff in the streets and alleyways? So what's the
I think that's a Derek question.
That's a Derek question, yes.
Sorry, can you repeat that one too?
So what are the parameters for an ideal property for a rain garden?
Ideally, your property is flat, but not too flat. And it would be sloping away from your house and towards the street. You have good infiltrating soil. You have a nice open area where you can put a rain garden. It's going to be, you don't have too many barriers between your downspouts and where the rain garden is going to be located, or you have a nice gentle slope on your impervious areas that'll take it to the rain garden. Not too many nearby trees. We don't want to be digging into tree roots in order to put in a rain garden. Anything else?
Is there a slope that's too steep for a rain garden?
Yeah, I think so. If this has come up with the city of Everett in the past for people that live on the west side, is if you're near a bluff, it can be too steep, or even within, what, 200 feet? Is that what you guys decided of a bluff, April? Or is it 150 feet?
I don't really remember that. I know that we do have certain areas, like
Yeah.
we've just put like a kibosh pretty much on areas along Grand and Alverson for specifics that we really will not allow rain gardens. And the only time that we would is if you actually brought in a contracted with an engineering firm to come in and do, the name of it is totally
Geological assessment, I think.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you. Yes. And those are not cheap. So it really becomes prohibitive for some people to put in a rain garden based on that. So we really do have just certain areas of Everett that we really just don't allow rain gardens due to the bluff and cliff issues.
And a slope is considered critical if it's more than 33%. So 33 feet of fall over 100 linear feet. Yeah, and it's mostly an issue, again, near bluff properties. And that's because we don't want to be purging a whole bunch of water next to a slope that could potentially be unstable. But yeah, Grand and then certain portions around Forest Park and that type of thing, we haven't been able to work in. But again, we can tell you where that is if that becomes an issue.
I would say on Grand, because I'm on the side that it's a no-go, but the other side is okay. And I think it's because extra water can run into the street and therefore catch up with a storm drain if possible.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
it's
even those homes on the east side of Grand have done a geotechnical. That's the only reason why they're in there. They're willing to spend the money to put in a geotechnical report saying that they've been signed off to have one.
Mhm.
I know that there's 2 on Grand, and both of them have had that done.
But Rutgers fine, right?
As far as I know, yeah, there definitely are some areas. It gets kind of difficult because they're really, if you look at the map, it splotches all over the
Right.
place. So it really is hard to be very specific about areas where it may not be possible. That's why it's better to be a site by site answer to that. But yes, in general, if you feel like you are near a bluff or a cliff or something like that, then you can assume that a rain garden is not the way to go.
Does anyone else have any questions? Just to let everyone know, I've put in the chat the 12,000 Rain Gardens website that April mentioned, and also Stewardship Partners. Certainly in the materials for this, I put in the rain garden page on our website, the Snohomish Conservation District, and then the cities as well. So really you can start anywhere talking to any of these people, and if it's the right thing, they'll move you down that pathway that April was talking about. Or if you're not in Everett, then reaching out to your local or a regional entity, because they're great ways to capture that extra water and return it back to the soil and back to the water table. It's great. So any other questions? And anything on plants, because we do have Philomena with us too. All right, seeing none,
I will say just on the plants, I do want to mention, I know we said that the handbook really has everything, and it really does have everything, but included with that, it does have a pretty substantial list of plants in the back. Because even though Derek didn't really, I don't think he really covered it, a rain garden has certain zones. So there is plants that are very specific to certain zones. And so you can start to really get a feeling for that. If you did some touring around, you can see the kind of variety of plants that you may see in the different zones of a rain garden. But I do want to, again, tout the handbook. It really does have a pretty extensive list of plants in the back. Mm-hmm. And I know, at least for Everett specific, it can be sometimes difficult because we don't have a lot of nurseries in Everett. So I don't know, Philomena, if you want to touch upon some of the places that are available for or where you might recommend. You could maybe tout the Master Gardener sale if you do have one of those.
We might have an online sale this coming year, but I'm not sure about that. Sunnyside Nursery is pretty close to Everett. A lot of people like to go there. What else? If you look at the WSNLA site, you can find nurseries in your area. I can give you that online. And would it be okay if I shared a picture, a recent picture of the rain garden Derek was featured?
Oh yeah, sure. And while she's getting that up, someone asked about us sending out the slides. Yes, I will be doing, the video will hit YouTube, and then we'll have posts. And so the slide decks will be in there and we'll send all that afterwards. So probably by the end of the week. Great question.
Can you see the picture?
Yes.
So I might mention that this person is a gardener, loves to garden. You don't need to have this many plants in your rain garden. And this may require a little bit more maintenance, but it just kind of shows what you can do.
That is beautiful. I am, oh, there's another question, but it may be more of a after question. The region, Kay asked, the region map on page 22 is not very easy to read in detail. And maybe the follow-up to there, Kay, is that in the rain garden booklet? Is there a site with this info that I can drill down so I can see which zone I am in? Or is there a more precise way to see what my annual rainfall is? Derek or David, do you know?
Yeah, so I mean, there's tons of rainfall maps. So if you just, I mean, what, I guess the easiest thing would be to ask what city she's in.
Kay, which city are you in? If you can type that into the chat. And this point is, I think, like April said, and then Derek as well, is that we can come out, certainly, obviously, in Snohomish County for the district, but there's King Conservation District and other entities. Sometimes it's easiest to do a specific site visit because your property is going to be different than somebody else's. And so we want to make sure that we're answering your questions well. So Kay wrote in unincorporated King County, north of Redmond and east of Woodinville.
Probably zone 3. Most people are in zone 3.
I think he's looking it up. So off Avondale, yeah.
Yeah.
And by all means, again, when I follow up with the email, I'll include all of our email addresses as well. So if you have specific questions, you can just direct those to Derek or to April or Philomena or David or myself.
You're about 40 inches per year.
Okay, yeah. And just one thing to mention, because I know both the city and the district have rain barrel programs, but that's kind of a nice step into this as well, rather than having a very large portion of your property taken up with a rain garden. You can add rain barrels and still be helpful. They take in 55 gallons of water, and some of these rains we've had recently can really, you can fill a barrel in a day, and then you can use that water on a day when it is dry, and therefore you don't have to use it off your tap. So that's something else we all work on as well. So any other questions? I'm not seeing any, but I would really like to thank everybody for being here today. And if all of my fellow participants and panelists can show their video for a second, there we go. It would be great to see everybody. So thanks again for being here. We'll follow up with lots of resources, and feel free to reach out to any of us and we will get back with you as soon as we can. So we hope we have answered your questions. And any final words from April or Derek or Philomena? No? All right, sounds great. All right, thanks everybody. Have a wonderful day. All right, take care. Bye.